So we can jump right into it. Let me go arrange my computer real quick. Okay. Oh, did anybody have a spiritual thought that they wanted to share?
I can follow up on the one I had from last week. I think I told you guys I issued a challenge to all the young men to read the Book of Mormon in 30 days, and a few of the young men followed through with that. What I didn't know is that there was a couple brothers that didn't attend the meeting that I challenged the young men to. They heard about it the following week, and they still jumped on it. And the very first week, they doubled up and they read as much as they could to catch up with everyone else. And that was the same time as finals week in school. And one of the young men was like, should I study for my finals? Should I read the Book of Mormon like I need to? And he opted to read his Book of Mormon. He finished the Book of Mormon. He went to class, not being able or without studying for his science exam. And believe it or not, between everyone in the class, he's the only one who got an A on the exam. It was funny. He said this during testimony meeting. He's like, hey, I'm not telling you guys not to study for your test, but if you read the Book of Mormon, you will be blessed. So it's pretty hilarious and awesome, too, that he took on the challenge even though he was a week late.
Good.
Dang.
Wow. Well, thank you. All right, so we're supposed to be discussing two cases today. We got the Brentwood Associates case and the Jim Sharp case. So the first question or first thing that we're supposed to look at in the Brentwood case, that's Zoe's Kitchen. So put yourself in the shoes of Brentwood Associates management. You must decide whether or not you will exit Zoe's Kitchen now, and if so, what is the best exit option? As a group, vote. So should they do an IPO? Should they sell to a strategic buyer or financial buyer, or wait and grow the business until it is more valuable before exiting?
I vote to hold.
Do we want to go over kind of the basics of the case before we go into the vote, or are we okay?
I feel like I'm pretty caught up.
Yeah, I got this one. I got this case pretty much down.
Okay. So, Derek, you said wait?
Hold. Yeah, I'd say hold.
I said IPO now.
I would wait as well.
I said IPO now.
Ooh, split decision. What do you say, John?
I actually recommend a sale to a private party.
Of course you do.
Strategic buyer or financial buyer.
I mean, you know best. So that's kind of what you do, isn't it? Or right up your alley. That's fun.
So, so why did you? So to go in order. So why those who thought you should sell? Why did you think that you should sell, and why IPO specifically?
I don't know. I just felt like that was the best route to take it. You know, take it to the public, let them buy stocks, and get more capital, and keep building more buildings and everything. And I don't know. I'd be hesitant on waiting because there was growth going on, but without, stockholders and everything, it would be hard to really grow the business into a big enterprise. So I felt like instead of waiting another few more years, I felt like the IPO was probably the best bet. And I thought about selling to another party, but at the same time, it was like, you know, I feel like they wanted the business to succeed because it would, you know, it would reflect on their company as well and how they grew that company and how they worked with them. So I feel like if they sold to a private party, there's always that risk that it can just turn into like a little franchise and get, you know, could get washed out pretty easy. So that's just what I thought.
I also said IPO now. One thing that stood out to me is he said he saw Noodles and Company and the success they were having, and he felt like their fundamentals were stronger than theirs. So I took that as he basically thought that, you know, the business model plan. It doesn't go too much into it, but basically he felt like Zoe's Kitchen had the stronger fundamentals. So I almost thought that, like, well, if you think you could be just as successful as a company that is doing well, why wouldn't you go with the IPO? You get more public recognition as well. So I would only imagine sales would go up. You would retain more customers and you'd retract more because your branding is much more visible to the public as well.
Okay, so for those who said to hold, to wait, why did you say that they should wait?
I think it is better for them to wait because, like in that moment, Soa's Kitchen was having kind of success, even though it was not as successful as Noodles and Co. Anyways, it was growing. You know, they were putting new establishments in other states and everything. So I think that the company could grow a little bit a little bit more within 2 to 3 more years, and it would be better for them to find better and more potential investors willing to pay a higher amount or to invest more in the company. Also, they would bring more um, firms willing to pay a higher amount for the company if they still wanted to exit the market, you know. So I think they would receive better deals if they would wait 2 or 3 more years.
Yeah, I think he even mentioned it himself. Like, what's the need to force an early exit? You know, you might just shoot yourself in the foot. And then when I read his other company, Brentwood, their whole approach to business was always to be growth oriented, and it just seemed like, what's the rush? I mean, yeah, you can chase that mighty dollar and hope that it goes big, but I mean, you might bite off more than you can chew. And so I wanted to go with more of a conservative approach instead of them collapsing with a management that's not ready to go public just yet. You know, you're going to wear them pretty thin, and if you're not ready to do big business with the staff that you have, you might implode.
And I said to go with the private party sale for a couple of reasons. One, I think it fit more with the strategy of Brentwood Associates. I think the kind of desire to leave it more kind of homegrown and to grow kind of slowly and to keep the management intact. I think that was important to them. And if they went through an IPO, the likelihood is that there would be a new board, there would be different management, that they would really just kind of take over the company. The other thing that I saw is if you looked at the multipliers, the revenue multipliers, there was a huge standard deviation on the IPOs. Like there were some down at like 12%, and then another one was at 12 times. There was another one at 42 times. So there was a high likelihood. There wasn't, maybe to say on average it was 21 times was really, in my opinion, misleading, because Zoe's Kitchen it's very small for an IPO, $115 million. I mean, that's not, I mean, I'm in a small town of 98,000 people, and there's companies in my town that are 115 million. And they're private and they have no interest in being public. So my concern was that with the huge variance in standard deviation being such a small company, that to expect a 21 times multiplier, I don't believe that is what would happen. So the standard deviation on a strategic investor or private sale was much more stable. The average was 13, but the standard deviation was only 6.5. So I could see it being a decently large company for a private sale at 115 million that they could expect, in my opinion, a higher than average multiplier. So I could see actually winning out both through a purchase price and from a management standpoint, the strategic investor being the best way to go.
Well said. I guess in terms of our paper, because it's probably going to ask what we collectively agreed on as a group.
I could also go with IPO. I mean, it's really expensive, but here's the thing. I would only say go IPO if they were planning on getting out. Like they were not wanting to be involved with it anymore, that fundamentally they changed their thought process and said, this is a pure exit. This is not a get capital, grow the business, be a part of it. I think IPO is sell it and get out and start a new investment.
Are you talking about the people who started it, or are you talking about Brentwood themselves to just get rid of it?
Well, so Brentwood had a manager, had the CEO that they kind of placed there, from my understanding. So I would suspect that under an IPO, there would be like almost all senior leadership would change, and Brentwood would lose connection with Zoe's Kitchen. So I would say pull out of the investment, take the money, take the return, invest in something else. If that was the thought process, or if they were okay with that, I would say do an IPO now.
Yeah, I mean, I just felt like Brentwood and Associates, they wanted like the recognition. I think they saw a lot of potential in the company, and I think they wanted to get it out to the public so that their company could get recognized. You get what I'm saying at the same time?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't care. Either way, we can just write it up. So, what do you guys want to do?
I think the majority was, well, either one of the other two. I would lean, I think, towards IPO. If I had to choose between those two only, I would say IPO and get the recognition, sell it, get out, and start a new investment.
So
the only reason why I say no, that they brought up in the case as well, is because if it flops, that puts their reputation at Brentwood at risk as well. I mean, it could go either way. If it goes well, then yeah, their reputation will shoot up. So, I mean, sometimes maybe it is worth the risk.
Yeah, it was too risky.
It could flop in 2 years though too.
Yeah,
I think they're fairly protected with that, though, with the new IPO laws saying that if you're under, what was it, $1 billion in revenue, that you didn't have to do a public statement at first. You could kind of do a roadshow, see what the interest was, and then if you went through with the IPO, I think it was 21 days in advance, you would file with the SEC that you were doing an IPO. So I think they're fairly protected by trying to do an IPO now, and they could, if it didn't go through, that's fine. Their reputation was still protected.
They did have 20 investment banks asking if they were interested in going public too. If that kind of gives a feel of.
Yeah, I thought that Noodles and Company comment was interesting because I did a case study on Noodles and Company, and they didn't start making profit until they had more than 5 stores open, which is crazy to me. It's like, how do you keep opening stores if you're not making a profit? So, and if they're fundamentally better than Noodles and Company, and Noodles and Company took off, I think the bank saw the potential in Zoe's. So
what did you? Oh, I guess I was looking at the assignment rather than the discussion. We should probably just keep going with the discussion. Oh, it is the same thing. So, what did you have for a value for Zoe's under each of the exit strategies?
that was hard. I was talking about that at the beginning before some of you guys were on. I was talking about how that was hard to judge what it was worth just based upon the exhibits. But I mean, I haven't written it in my paper yet just because I wanted to make sure we all coordinated together and see what you guys thought as well.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
This is what I came up with. And I hope I'm doing this right. I don't know. I'm going to lean on you, John, because I feel like you're the most business savvy when it comes to the numbers. So,
yeah, that looks right to me.
So, Derek, just for future reference for me, what formula did you plug in for the enterprise value? It's
just multiplying the two.
Mm-hmm.
So
you just did the average.
Yeah, so you find out what the average is, and then you find out which. I'll give you some numbers to reference, at least.
Oh, you're good. You're good. I see what you did now.
Yeah, because on Exhibit 9, you can get the average strategic acquirer and financial acquirer.
Yeah.
Those numbers, the 13 and the 8. And then, let's see here. Oh, on the very last page, Exhibit 10, you look at the the average all comps for the current one, not the forecast. And that's how you get the 20.9. And then the 10,000. Did I get that? Oh, that's in Exhibit 7. Under adjusted percent margin. Or, sorry, adjusted EBITDA. So they're all there, but it's just kind of hard to fish for.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense what you did. And
yeah, that's a really good guess. Actually, I couldn't locate those. That data in the exhibit. So.
Yeah, you have to pull from a few of the exhibits to get those numbers, and then obviously make your own.
Yeah.
Spreadsheet, which mine's very basic.
Thank you for that.
Hopefully that helps.
So the only adjustment I made on mine for a real expected value on the IPO is I did not agree that they were going to get the average multiplier. I thought at the very best guess, at the very most optimistic, that they would need to take a 10% reduction on the multiplier because their revenues were so low. So I had them at best case scenario IPO at 18.9 times EBITDA. So I had them at 189 million valuation.
That makes sense.
Fair enough.
So with that in mind, Derek, do you want to put that back up? Because I think that's at least a fair representation. I think we could play around with it a little bit. The standard deviation. The only thing here, I can pull mine up actually. Cool.
I'll close mine then.
actually didn't do all this in my write-up, but I think the graph or it's helpful to see it. So let's see here. Share. So I had the only thing that I added on there was the standard deviation, and the different, so financial sponsor, strategic investor, and then publicly traded. The standard deviation for a financial sponsor was very small, so you could pretty much guarantee about 8 times EBITDA was what you were going to get. On the strategic investor, the average was 13, but the standard deviation was 6.5. So you could see feasibly within reason up to almost 20% or 20 times EBITDA. And then publicly traded was even more drastic. I mean, there was one publicly traded company that had 42 times EBITDA. So their standard deviation was 12.2. So, I mean, you could feasibly have something down at like 9 times EBITDA. So I included in my write-up a 10% reduction in the multiplier just because I thought they were so small. But I think we could easily assume, a 10% increase or a 10% increase on the multiplier for a strategic investor because they're pretty solid. They have a good reputation. They're well managed. They're making money, and they're fairly large for a private sale. So that would be the only thing I would say is we could probably add a 10% here, take away 10% here, and this is going to be pretty much what it is on a financial sponsor. So
thanks for explaining that.
So I actually should probably go in and add a line and show what my adjustments would be and then what the final value would be. 14.5. So this would be about 145 million, and this would be 189 million. And this would be, I would keep that the same. The standard deviation was so small that I think 8 is going to be what the multiplier is. So how do we, okay. Does anybody else, why would it want to sell the financial buyer? I think we kind of answered the other questions. Does anybody else have anything that they want to discuss for the Brentwood Associates case? Okay, so we'll jump into the Jim Sharp case. Do we need to go over kind of an executive summary on that, or are we pretty good on it?
We kind of mentioned before you jumped on there's a lot of, I would say, fluff before you get into the nitty gritty, and then I don't even know that there's much nitty gritty to work with. I mean,
in the Jim case,
yeah, he gave a lot of perspective on how he got until he finally purchased it, and his lessons learned from all the other big companies, which were great information, I think, in general, but not much to work off of when you're making a decision.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Questions.
I should have spent more time reading it because it was hard to pull out the good stuff.
Yeah, he basically just it came down to what all the businesses he looked at and his opinions on what the lawyers were worth in the decision making, and what the banks were telling him in decision making and all this stuff. And he basically was like, I know everything, I'm the best, and did what he wanted. He was very arrogant in the case. Anyone else pick up on that?
Yeah.
I kind of read between the lines that same thing.
Yeah.
So to me, really the only thing that was of any importance, other than the first part of it, was the exhibits.
Yep.
And it really was just the one exhibit, the business plan. And then some of his conversation with the seller. But other than that, yeah, it was a ton of fluff. I mean, it was all distraction.
Like the first question was like, assess this venture from Jim Sharp's perspective. I was like, he went and worked for many different companies over the years and he gained experience. And then later he decided he wanted to be an owner and his own boss. The end.
Yeah.
That totally could have been summarized in less than a paragraph, and yet they opted to write 4 or 5 pages on that same thing you just said, which is great, because we have a lot of time on our hands. We can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty good executive summary. I mean, so what did you think? So how has Jim Sharp purchased this venture? And what are the implications of this financial structure?
I mean, he basically took into consideration all his past experience. He knew what he liked and what he enjoyed and what he thought he was good at. And he researched the companies in the area and then started researching more into each one, and ultimately came down to what, it just kind of all worked out in the end for him in that one company, and that's what he did well.
I'm trying to think, like, with financial implications, is that with the business plan he made up, or is that just the deal itself? Because it seemed like the seller wanted his $2 million so he can brag to everyone, I sold the company for $2 million. And that's where it seemed like they had to work things out, whether it was a payment plan, which it sounded like it ended up being. But beyond that, I didn't have any other like financial numbers to give in that question.
There was something with this purchase that I don't know what you think, guys, but I don't think it was good for him to accept all the petitions from the previous owner of the company. Because everything he agreed with everything. I mean, the price, not talking with the employers, not with anyone else. So I think that was not a good idea, because when he was going to meet like everyone, he didn't really know the company. I don't think it was a good idea to agree with everything the previous owner wanted.
Yeah, he was kind of passive about it.
Yeah, I would say this is probably the most impulsive $2 million I've ever seen spent. Like, he didn't do any research, like none. He knew nothing about this business when he bought it.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, in his eyes, he just wanted 100% ownership, and I think, they came to terms with that. But beyond that, like, he didn't know the industry all that well. Granted, he was in other major companies that he was able to adapt, but you got a wife and a newborn on the way, and you're going to just gamble $2 million. I got it, hon. Don't worry.
Yeah. So I interpreted this question, how has Jim Sharp purchased this venture, as to like, what was the actual financing mechanism? Like, how did he actually structure the deal to get it financed?
He kind of did, how do you say that, bootstrapping. He was trying to save as much money as he could, and to save money with in his expenses with his wife. So the money he used to buy the company was his own money, right? He didn't ask for loans or investments.
Kind of.
Also, kind of. Why? I don't remember.
So he did get a bank loan, or his proposal was a bank loan it was like $750,000, and then he was putting in $100,000 of his own money, and then he was going to get an owner carry note for the rest of it. So he did.
Really?
So yeah. So he's into it personally, What page is that on? Let me see. It's like the last 2 pages of the case. Yeah, if you look at the last page of the case, it's under sources and uses of cash at closing. So bank debt was 707,000. Equity from Jim was 100,000, and then there was the rest was an owner carry note.
Oh, I see it.
So 1.2 million was the owner that came back and said, "Yeah, I'll pay. I'll take a note on it." But he actually did get bank financing, and he did put $100,000 of his own money into it.
Got it. Yeah, I think he didn't do what he had to do. I mean, even though he thought he had like lots of experience with businesses, I mean, everything was made up of bad decisions.
Yeah. I think he was. So this case is more along the lines of what I do every day. And I would not have put this deal together for him. I wouldn't have let him. So one of the key things, we talk about covenants in church, but there are covenants in banking too. And when you set a covenant, it is something that can trigger default. And the seller of the business said, if you miss any of the covenants that I set or the bank sets, then I get back 99% of the company. You retain 1%, and you're done essentially. So just to give you an example of what covenants can be, I have a line of credit out to a company right now. It's only $1 million, but one of the covenants is that they have to provide me their tax returns by a certain date, and if they don't, then I can consider them in default. So if a CPA takes longer than expected to get you the taxes or whatever, you have to extend your tax return, then he could technically be in default and he loses 99% of the company. So I would be, I don't see in this scenario, I just see Jim getting into a big mess and not understanding what he's doing, not understanding how precarious his position is with the company. Granted, I mean, the way that they have it set up, if he files bankruptcy, then he doesn't have to pay the bank back, but he lost $100,000 in cash, and the other guy gets the company back. So he'll have 10 years where that bankruptcy is shown on his credit report, and he's out. I mean, a lot of companies, I guess a lot of companies do credit checks, but this was several years ago. But I mean, it'd be hard to find a job in today's world with a bankruptcy.
Yeah, it looked like he had way more on the line than the actual seller.
Yeah, the seller had nothing.
And he agreed to it.
Yeah.
Like he signed his life away almost.
Yeah.
He has so much to lose. I can't believe he did it. Just like.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot. So he's got more than 100,000 because I think, if I remember right, he personally guaranteed it. So his house is on the line. Everything he owns is on the line. So it's not just that 100 grand. That's how much cash immediately is gone. But they could go in foreclosure on the house and some other things. So I guess I got off track. What was the question that we were supposed to be answering? What should Jim do on his first day as owner of Extrusion Technology Inc.?
Well, I think he needed to make plans, first of all, financial plans, but this company was not going too well. I mean, this was not a successful company, and the employers, I think production was not well established. So he needed like to find out what was the problem there, and try to fix it. You know, what was the problem with the production or the marketing or whatever. And well, he needed to get to know his employees. Does it say how many employees the company had? I don't think so.
I think it did at one point. It was like 35, I think. Can't remember. I remember seeing it somewhere.
I know I made mention of him possibly dissolving the union that was there. Is that possible when you buy out a company? Or
Employees. The plant is unionized by the Teamsters and employs 37 direct factory workers and 20 in other functions. So he's got 57 employees. I don't think he's going to be able to get rid of the union, personally.
seems like that's one of the major reasons for the guy selling it without saying it. Just the tone of the case, it just sounds like there's a lot of tension on that topic. Plus, the owner's got all these extravagant things on the side that he doesn't want to share. He took way too much money out of the company to buy his own toys, sounds like.
So what should he do on his first day?
You should fire HR since clearly they've done nothing. Yeah, he pretty much should fire everyone with the reputation they have for the bad quality service. I guess the place is bleak too, so it's hard for me to even know why he bought this company still.
Yeah,
I think changing morale quickly as he can would really make a big difference on whether
like the company culture.
I actually think he should do the due diligence he should have done before he bought the company and look at how bad it actually is and see if he needs to sue the guy to get out of the deal. Like that he fraudulently misrepresented what the company was.
That's true. He said not until you own it can you ask questions. So day one, now that he owns it, he's just all right, give it to me straight.
That's a red flag already when he makes that statement.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So what should his action plan be for the next 6 months and the next 12 months? What should his priorities be?
Well, I think the company was not providing the product they needed to. I mean, the product that the customers were willing to buy. So it says in the case study that even the equipment was too old. I mean, everything was bad, you know, in the production department and everything. So I think he needed to find out what equipment he needed to change, or what marketing strategies he needed to apply, because there were not too many customers for the products. So I think that's an important thing to do.
I think since he's good at streamlining production, he can focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think he said they were paying way too much for the supplies that weren't being used in their production line. I mean, if you can cut the fat early on and not waste money, you're better off.
I think one of the reasons that they ended up needing more inventory than they were using right away was because they were doing low profit special projects, and so they didn't know from project to project what they would be working on. You know, they would show up and, you know, they'd be told this is the project you're working on. But if they were more invested, if they had a better product set and better clients, then they could, from a manufacturing standpoint, they could have year over year contracts where they know, they could go to their customer and say, hey, we're renewing this contract for the same stuff. It seemed like they were doing specialty projects that they were just the low bidder and that was it. And that's not a long-term strategy. I think they need to look at their product set and make sure that they have good relationships with their customers for recurring projects, not just one-time bid stuff. So did Jim make the right acquisition?
No.
Not at all.
I think we kind of summed it up. I think you mentioned at the start it was impulsive way to spend $2 million, and it's like he just was tunnel vision on the fact of being 100% owner. I still don't know why you would buy. It's like buying a house without seeing it almost. Like
Yeah.
You would never do that. It should be the same. I mean, it's not exact apples to apples, but I mean,
It's Storage Wars.
yeah.
That's a good show.
I mean, does anyone think there's a possibility why it was the right acquisition?
I only said that it might have accidentally been the right acquisition, but it was definitely not because of good research. But he may have found like a golden goose that just like it was terribly run, which is what he was hoping for, to find a poorly run company and turn it into something good. And he definitely found a poorly ran company. I don't know if it had, if the company itself, if the bones of the company were strong enough to turn it around. So he might have by accident found a company, but it was not by research.
You feel like his arrogance, we kind of talked about he seemed arrogant, probably got him in this situation too? Kind of naive about it?
Yeah, I think he was more ignorant in some aspects than anything. But ignorance usually comes to some degree with arrogance because you think you know everything, and so you don't research what you don't know, and you don't ask people.
Was there a follow-up so we actually know what happened?
I was looking for that. I was hoping there would be. I didn't see one. Did you guys?
Mm-mm.
No.
I was thinking that maybe this was the one miracle. He's like, he did great.
Yeah. No, I don't see anything in the discussion. Yeah. I don't see anything. All right. So it says at the beginning of this at the end of your meeting, take time to give a summary of your votes and final decisions thoughts. You will need to provide a timestamp in addition to your link so the instructor will know when the summary begins. So if we're okay, I think we can kind of do a summary now of the two cases. So summary, we're at what? Derek, do you have the time stamp on it? Because you're recording it, right?
I'm recording it, but it doesn't even show on mine what time we're at.
Interesting. Huh.
I've seen other people like put a blank piece of paper up so you can kind of scroll through.
Yep.
There we go.
Okay.
Leave that up for a couple of seconds, then we can know that's when it starts.
Yeah. All right. So, summary of the Brentwood case. We had kind of had a split decision on that, but I think we ended up leaning more towards an IPO now, with the understanding or with the mentality that Brentwood Associates would take the money they made, take the notoriety for having made it a public company, and just move on to another investment. That they were kind of leaving it alone after that. We guessed, based on the small revenue size, that they probably would not hit the average EBITDA multiplier, which was 21. So we guessed. I mean, I put on. I think a 10% reduction would be at least what they would get, and that put it at, I think, 18.9 times EBITDA. So the value of Zoe's Kitchen would be around 190 million for an IPO. And then the Jim Sharp case. Does anybody have anything else that they want to add in summary of the Brentwood Associates case?
No.
Okay. So the Jim Sharp case assessed this venture from Jim Sharp's perspective. We had a hard time with that because all of us thought it was a terrible idea, and he went with it anyway. So I guess our summary of the Jim Sharp case was we think he might have made a bad decision. He gave away cash and his house as collateral for a loan, which we were fairly certain was going to probably end up in default, and the seller was going to end up with the company back, and the buyer, or Jim Sharp, would end up with the bankruptcy on his credit. What he should be doing immediately is assessing whether or not he made a bad decision. So now that he can talk to the employees and really look at operations and talk to customers and all that, he should do that now and see if he really did make a really poor decision, and see if he might be able to go back and maybe even sue the seller for falsification of information or something to get out of it. And then if he decides to stay with it next 6 to 12 months, he needs to reevaluate the equipment. It sounds like it might be outdated and maybe not even the right equipment. So evaluate the equipment, evaluate the employees,
The building.
see if the building. That, luckily, was under lease, so he wasn't necessarily stuck in there long term. But it's also hard to switch buildings if you got a whole manufacturing process set up. But yeah, the building was in disrepair too. And then to try to negotiate with the unions. I think that they're the union. I think that that's going to be a big issue. And then, so overall, did Jim make the right acquisition? I think we universally or unanimously agreed that he did not. At least he didn't. If he did, it would have been sheer accident. It wouldn't have been because, the research showed that it was a good acquisition. Does anybody have anything else that they want to add to the Jim Sharp case?
That was well done.
Right. Okay. So Derek, if you want to end the recording, then we can look at the assignment together real quick.